Welcome and thank you for joining us today for a conversation with Debbie Richards on navigating agentic AI for strategic talent development. Please feel free to let us know where you're joining us from today, either your location or your company if you'd like. A recording of this webcast, which will be about 45 to 60 minutes long, will be available on the Clarity Consultants website and also on Clarity's YouTube channel. You're welcome to submit comments or questions in the chat feature at any time, and we'll get to as many of those as we can today. I'm your host, Brenda McNabb, the VP of Service and Development with Clarity Consultants, and I'd like to welcome our guest today, Debbie Richards. Debbie, how are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you, Brenda. I'm so excited to be here with everyone.
Well, we are really excited. This is such a hot topic, and I know we have a lot of interest, a lot of people joining us today. So thank you again for your generosity. And can we start? Well, what I'd like to do is start by discussing our objectives today rather quickly. We are going to be defining agentic AI for talent and development, discussing the tactical versus the strategic use of AI, and also the practical applications and ethical considerations of agentic AI. So, Debbie, if you don't mind starting us off with that first one, which is defining agentic AI and talent and development.
Oh, yes, I'd love to do that. And I'll just say, I've been working in this field for a number of years, and this is one of the key things that I find that people really struggle with is understanding the difference. So, it makes sense to talk about this. The first one is what I'll call the AI assistant. And that AI assistant is a tool that we can use to make our work faster. And for example, that might be something that helps us draft emails, summarize meetings, answer questions. And so in that case, AI is the informer or the advisor. And the interaction that you have is reactive. It waits for you to answer the question. Um, and then what happens is the way that you can judge the success of that is, can it save you time? How accurate is the information that you're getting from it? And the risk is, for example, getting some inaccurate information. And that in that case is where that might hallucinate. An example of an assistant or a chatbot would be you asking the question, how do I reset my password? And it goes off and it looks for that information and provides that back to you. Um, in contrast, you can think about agentic AI as a digital worker, and that is a system that executes goals. And in that case, it may plan workflows. It can connect to other software like your LMS or your HRIS system, and it can perform multitasks. And in this case, it's the doer or the executor. And it is very proactive, so it's going to go off and complete a task. And an example of that may be a command like reset the password for this person and email them. Um, so in that case, the one thing that I will say is the risk here for these agents is that action. Because they have permission to execute tasks like deleting a file, sending an email, maybe even approving a budget request, a mistake can have real world consequences. And I'm hoping that that resonates with everyone.
No, it certainly does. And I realize I forgot to have you introduce yourself. So if you don't mind taking a step back, we'd love to hear a little bit about your background, your journey, and what you're working on now, just to give us a little
Sure.
context for your expertise
Sure.
in it. Thank you.
My official role in different organizations is trusted advisor or technology consultant, and I have done that for many, many years and worked with a number of enterprise organizations in both healthcare, manufacturing, oil and gas, energy, retail. I love to come in and help people who are trying to implement a technology solution, project manage that project, and kind of serve the bridge between maybe IT and other departments because I have a strong IT background. I started my career as a robotics programmer and worked in IT for many years before I transitioned to talent development. I'm currently working on a lot of AI initiatives. I teach AI workshops and certification programs for the Association for Talent Development. I speak at conferences. I've been talking a lot about establishing your AI North Star and understanding how to plan strategically for bringing AI into your organization.
Yes, and that is something that so many companies need right now. We hear about it all the time. In fact, with our clients, and we're constantly talking to mainly large companies, when we ask them about where they're at with AI, what kind of access our consultants will have, what they'll be able to use, it's interesting to see how many are sort of not operating without that basic structure there. So, well, thank you. I can see you have a lot of fans, Debbie, here. So that's
Hi,
really great.
everybody.
So I just want to go back to, I want to nutshell what you said about the difference between an assistant and an agent. And one seems to be reactive. The assistant is perhaps more reactive, and the agent is proactive and also autonomous. Like we don't often know uh, that it's even interfacing with us and the information we're working with. Fascinating. Yeah. So beyond that, is there anything else you'd like to put a punctuation on regarding the assistant versus agent, particularly in how it's used in learning and development and talent?
Right. So I would say the assistant helps you do work, and
Mhm.
then the agent does the work for you. And one of the things that I know people are struggling with is how to get started. I've had people ask me, do I start first with assistants before trying to build agents? And when I talk about assistants, I'm talking about things like creating GPTs in ChatGPT or gems in Gemini, those sorts of things. So they're like one step beyond just doing a basic prompt. Um, and I think that it's better to master assistants before thinking about or trying to deploy agents. And I'll tell you
Mhm.
why. I use what I call the crawl, walk, run philosophy.
Mhm.
Okay. So jumping straight to agents is like trying to run a marathon before you've really learned how to walk and practice things a while. You're going to risk tripping over hurdles, and you really need to think through that process, just like you would do with any other program or process that you're bringing about. You thinking through that needs analysis, designing something, testing a prototype, and then thinking about all the risks that are involved, and then finally taking that to a developer or an advanced programmer to build that. um, there are some ways that you can do what is called vibe coding, where you can build out a temporary application and test it. And in fact, this morning I was playing in Gemini because they just introduced in Gemini their Opal tool, which allows you to build those mini apps and pull those together. But I'm going to back up and just talk a little bit about these phases and why I think starting with assistance is a strategic move. So first of all, the human in the loop component. Those
Mhm.
of those of you guys that know me, you'll know that my philosophy is human AI human. So we start with that human component. We are talking to our AI assistant or whatever we're doing. They provide some information, and then we have to go in and look at it. Okay, so if you think about the assistant piece, let's say if the output goes to you first, if the AI hallucinates or writes a bad learning objective, you can catch it and fix it, and you are the safety filter. Okay. Now, if you have an agent, the output goes directly to the system or to the end user or to the learner. And if the agent malfunctions, it might auto enroll 5,000 employees in the wrong compliance course. Oh my God, so we need to learn the AI's limitations safely. And when we work with assistants, it teaches our team where AI tends to fail without those public consequences. So the other thing that I think is very important is to have a bit of prompt literacy. So if before you can ask an agent to build and execute complex workflows, like you need to know how to ask for it clearly. So if your team struggles to even get good results from a chatbot or an assistant, this will be even harder trying to configure an agent. So we've got to practice and build up our prompt engineering. And that's our training ground, doing that with assistants. Um, and also, we're going to talk about a little bit about data hygiene because assistants are forgiving. You can put messy text in and upload a rough draft and it will make sense of it and try to answer questions. But agents are very strict. So for an agent to act, like sending an LMS record or sending a specific notification or or whatever you're doing, the data's got to be structured and it's got to be clean. And I think that that's a challenge right now. I think that a lot of L&D teams are discovering that their data, the tagging, the naming conventions, the file structures aren't really ready for automation yet because you've got to make sure that everything is very precise. And if you use those assistants, that'll expose those data gaps gently so you can go in and work on them. Now with assistants, you can start today. You can use an assistant to build out those scenarios. You can summarize those meetings. You can outline courses. Um, and the time to value is minutes. But when you're using an agent, it may require things like connecting APIs between your HIRS system and your agent, approval, testing, and that could take a long time. So starting with the agent allows you to build up that proof of concept and talk about building a business case for what you're trying to do, and you can set those technical guidelines for the agents. And I'm sorry, I get very excited about this stuff
No,
and
no, it's good.
don't
It's
mean to
so
ramble.
interesting and it's complex, which is definitely what I'm hearing here. Can you give us some ideas about how it manifests in talent development, agentic AI, and what it looks like in practice? For example, you mentioned a few examples along the way.
Yeah, yeah. So here's a simple example. So let's say you have an onboarding um, where you want to move some information for employees. If you are using the assistant piece, you could be an instructional designer who uses AI to write a script for a welcome video and maybe a checklist for onboarding that's generic that people can use. But here's where an agent might come into play. Okay, so an agent might be monitoring your HIRS system for new hires. And when it detects a new hire, there's a workflow that goes into play. It looks at the role of that new employee and its department. And then it may generate a personalized 30, 60, 90-day learning plan. And it may also be connected, especially if you're using Microsoft Copilot or something else and you're working in that environment, where it can schedule meetings or introductions with cross-functional peers in Outlook for you. It may come back and going in and looking at different tools and say, okay, do you have access to these tools? And if you don't, then it'll generate the IT request tickets to get you access to those tools. So there's a lot of different terminologies and things that are in place that we'll see. And I see in the comments somebody has asked about the difference between an AI agent and Automate. I'm just going to say I'm not like super up on Power Automate. That's a great question. I'm going to write that down and maybe I'll put something out on LinkedIn about that. But what I'll say is that agent is that back end tool, and I think also what that when we're using those agents too, that really takes us into that transformational stage where we're viewing AI as a system, like the digital workforce and some of the things that we're talking about now. There still needs to be some audit decision points in whatever we're doing. Um, so what are some of we look for where work is slow, and that's where we've got agents, but or assistants, but we also need to look for places where simple data-driven assistants could help us. Um, and from that point, when we're thinking about those strategic agentic things, it may be um, we spend a lot of time matching employees to mentors based on skill. Could that be something that we could use an
Mhm.
agentic tool for? So I'm hoping that that is a good example. I've got a couple others if you want me to share those too.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking that it sounds like, and I was reading, there was a McKinsey article that came out recently, that a lot of companies are stuck in the tactical use of AI, and many of them are finding that they can't really track it to ROI. So there's this big push to get into that strategic use of agentic AI, and it will be interesting to see. I know we'll talk about your thoughts on the future, even the near future with respect to that, because there's a big push from the big businesses to get over that hurdle. But as you're discussing this, the complexity of it and the upskilling necessary to have these tools at your disposal when their impact can be so massive. A mistake is much more has much more consequences, for example.
Definitely.
So is this a good time to discuss the practical applications or the ethical considerations, or are there more regarding uh, sort of the examples of it that you'd like to go into, or even, how it is going to impact leadership, management? I did see a statistic that 75% of roles are going to need to be redesigned or upskilled. It looks like the information right now isn't that jobs will be lost, but there will be a tremendous shift in the near term. So,
Yeah, I agree. And I think one of the areas that people are really concerned with is thinking about using it in um, different types of applications. One of those applications is that I've seen is like a 24/7 career coach. Okay, so when you're thinking about um, information here, planning out those learning paths and nudging the users for to finish different paths without a manager involved. So this is a shift from a pull where people, we hope people will go out and find learning to a push where we develop learning in the moment of need. And so the agent then is that supportive layer that provides the make sure that people are turning a plan into an action. So what the old way of personalized training would be where somebody goes in, they look for content, they get a generic email reminder, and then their goal is the completion of the course. Whereas when you've got perhaps a career coach that you're using, the agent might detect a skill gap and reach out and set up an adaptive path for you. So, based on your ability and what you're doing, it may say, okay, we're going to skip the 101 course here and just concentrate on the 201 course because that's what you really need. And then it'll look at your calendar and other things and say, hey, you've got some downtime here. So why don't we jump in and do this? And the goal here is the readiness for the new role. So if you're thinking about moving and different things. So how it works then is it might have like the eyes where it's going in and updating different things, and then it's doing that dynamic skill path change and just-in-time support. So, you may not have a human coach ready for you for if you're prepping for a big presentation. So, if you use an agent, it might help you bring in an effective public speaking bullet point list and stuff when you open up PowerPoint and how you can do it. And so there could be different types of things that you can do that enable this to be a process where it can plan and nudge you without a manager. And so I'm going to talk a little bit later. I want to save this, but I think there are some places where we don't want AI to do this, and we don't really want to have AI involved in some of those things. The other place that I think that it'll be a big impact is for just for instructional designers and folks that are doing different types of work. And I'm actually have I've been working on a TD at Work guide that's going to come out in February that's going to talk more about this. And it's the idea of shifting our way we work from being builders to being architects. And I think that a lot of people fear that with AI that there's going to be less work. And I think instead of it being less work, there's going to be more high value work. So instead of spending 40 hours building one polished e-learning module that becomes outdated in 6 months, we're going to spend 40 hours building a learning agent that can train, quiz, and support employees, updating itself as new information becomes available. And I actually saw an example of a system that's doing that this morning, and I'm so eager to go in and test it and try it because I know that there are a number of learning systems that are incorporating this technology in what we're doing. So when you think about that, how this comes into play is, first of all, if you're thinking about content creation, today as a builder, we might write three different scenarios for a quiz based on our target audience. Okay. And when in the future, we might have that agent generate 20 different variations and then select the best three and then refine the nuance for them. When we're talking about interacting with SSMEs, okay, I can remember years of going to an SME and interviewing them to get information. You know, you get the SME that sends you the 500-page PowerPoint,
Oh, yeah.
and you're looking at it and you're going, "Oh my gosh, what am I going to do with this? You know, how am I going to interact with this person?" But now we could feed all that information into the agent and then have the agent summarize it, and we can then go in and verify that understanding with the subject matter experts.
Well,
Um,
and
and-
I think that, the individualized learning path is the big jump here.
Mhm.
And that's such a huge change uh, for, I guess, in the daily life of an instructional designer, which I know you'll talk a little bit more about. Um, so creating the agents being the next logical step there, as opposed to, I wonder how far in the future is that, and will there always be a need for those training courses? Kind of a dramatic question, but I would think there would be.
Oh yeah, and so somebody just put in the chat that real-time content update is a fantastic pain point improvement. So just imagine now you have a course and you've got to manually update a file and to include some type of policy update. So if you have a knowledge source file, an agent can go in and it can automatically push that update to all the courses and to the chat bots or to whatever that reference it as well. And so that's going to be a big time saving. Now, I will say though, there are some things that we have to be concerned about, and we have to have some guardrails in place.
Mhm.
Um, and so these are things that I think that are very, very important as we think through this and as we start building out these things. So the first thing is having permissions. Okay. And that's what can it do? You know, what can we have on our assistant do? What can we have our agent do? Um, and the biggest thing is where an agent, the biggest risk isn't what an agent says, but it's what it executes. So you've got to control its hands per se.
Right.
First place there is in thinking in terms of read versus write access.
Mhm.
So a very safe process here is the agent can go in and read the catalog to recommend a course. Okay, that's pretty safe. There's not going to be, the only thing there is maybe it recommends the wrong course. I don't know. You got to check that out. But where it becomes a challenge is if you give the agent the ability to delete or post into some things. So the fix here is having the agent only have draft privileges. So it could draft an email, but like say a manager asks it to draft an email, it can do that, but the manager has to click send. The manager has to give it that human element and update it. It can
Mhm.
queue up a bunch of training assignments, but maybe we want to let an admin approve the batch. Um, so we want it to we want to make sure that it does that. So that's in thinking about setting those permissions, which you can
Mhm.
do as you're building out the information. The next thing is the idea of what the agent or AI will say, because you've got to prevent it from hallucinating policies or being ruled or whatever you need to do. And I call this the safety sandwich. So this is keeping that layer in between everything. So if there's certain things, and like I was talking to someone the other day, they're building out their need assessment, their business case to build out international chatbot system for all their employees that's going to cover different things like pay time off, all the things that you would want to go to HR, and it's going to be a 24/7 piece. And they're hoping that that will give folks quick access, but they want to make sure that if there's certain types of questions that they've guardrailed, that they'll come back to a real person to ask that. So let's just say somebody says to the chatbot, how do I skirt the new compliance law? Okay. All right. So we've got have a guardrail in place, and it says, I cannot help you with bypassing compliance. Would you like to review the policy? So there could be some constructive feedback, or they can say, you really need to talk to somebody else around that. And so we've also got to go in and watch before the answer is shown to the user, maybe you've got another check that's going to look for bias or other things. So if the answer doesn't look right or something, maybe the system blocks it and says, I'm having trouble finding that answer right now. And also, maybe we hard code the tone of the system prompts that says, something like, you're a helpful coach. You're never sarcastic. If you don't know the answer 100%, admit it and refer the user to, the human resources emails or something like that. So, we've got to put those guardrails in for what the agent will say. Okay. And then the next piece is that human component. So
Mhm.
if the agent perhaps is only 75% sure about what it's about its answer, then maybe it'll say, I want to make sure I'm going to give you the right answer. Let me flag this for a human expert to review. And you'll see, I mean, you actually see some of that now in chatbots and systems and stuff. I was on a chatbot system this morning because I was trying to get clarification on something specific in my billing system. And they kept on referring me to pages to look at and stuff. They'd say, well, you need to look at this policy, whatever. And I finally got frustrated and I said, I want to talk to a real human. And then it waited for a few minutes and it says, hi, this is Bill. I'm a human. Tell me your question. And I told him what the question was. And he gave me the same darn policy stuff. And I said, you are not human. I said, I want to talk to a real person, not a chat. So I think every agent system needs that chat with a human button. Okay. Um, if we feel like the agent is looping or is confused, we got to have the power to fire that agent and switch to a real person.
Wow,
And
that's huge. I think everybody would vote for that one because I can tell you how many times it just doesn't seem to be helpful at all. An evolving technology for sure.
yeah, so we experience it. So if we're building those agent systems, we need to build that in as well. So let's think about some of the things that are, think in terms like of a traffic light.
Mhm.
What's a green light? What's yellow light? What's red light? And I know Brian said, how can we ever be certain that we have all the guardrails in place? We don't even know what we don't know. Sometimes I ask AI, what am I missing? What do I need? As I'm doing that. But green light, okay. So maybe we say, okay, the agent, we're going to give you the ability to schedule meetings. Okay. We're going to give you the ability to find documents or answer questions from the handbook, but we're going to say, only refer to the information in this handbook to answer the questions. And I would think that that would be a low risk type opportunity. Light is where we've got to have that human intervention in. So that might be things like drafting email, where I said that the manager or whoever is using it has to hit, this is good, I'm going to send it. Or it could be different types of things. So the agent drafts it, the human approves it and sends it. And then the last one is your red light. Okay. This is where we're not going to let an agent do anything. And that would be those things that are very touchy, like maybe it's disciplinary action or salary discussions or even mental health counseling. You
Mhm,
know,
mhm,
we don't want AI to do that for us. So
mhm.
we're going to block all of those things.
Yeah. Wow. And out in the wild right now, there is all kinds, there are no guardrails, right? In many of these tools. Well, you mentioned, I don't know if you want to pivot to, I'm not seeing a whole lot of questions here, but loving the comments. Would love to get to those. And then you had talked about the governance and the ethical considerations. So just let me know when you want to let us know when you want to pivot to that part of the conversation, because at some point we want to talk about the human element of this with respect to how we're interfacing with agents specifically.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about the human connection because I think that's real
Mhm,
important. And this is in talking about this coaching and some of those things, those are a great way to frame some of the things we're talking about when can we use an agentic system and when do we need to have a real person. So we want to make sure we don't lose that human connection. We want to save it for when it really matters. Okay. So if your mentors are spending time explaining how to use software, okay, that's a waste of that human relationship. Okay, let the agent go in and teach the software, let the human teach the strategy. So let's say the question might be for an agent, how do I fix an Excel error? Because it can go off and it can, pull that information. That's very basic. But let's say for that human thing would be, how do I navigate this disagreement I had with my boss? Okay, that's not something we
mhm,
want an agent to answer. So and the agent could be that 24 on demand, data driven correction type coaching and information to help you build ultimately competence with whatever it is that you're using. Whereas that mentor, that real person, you're going to schedule time with them. You're going to have that deep, focused meeting with them. You're going to have maybe the feedback that you're going to give in that might be stories or examples or whatever we're going to do there. And this is the we need to have that type of environment because what will happen if we don't, we're going to create a workforce that is competent, that's proficient technically, but
mhm,
they're isolated culturally. And that's going to be the real challenge. So when you're thinking about that, we're going to let AI handle the content and the human is going to handle the context of what we're doing. So we've got to keep those things separated. Another way of thinking about it is think about AI being the transactional role, and then the person being the transformative role as well. So you could have AI help you practice your sales pitch, okay? Um, but then you might talk to a coach or your human mentor who's going to kind of help you with the fact that about how you might feel uncomfortable presenting to a vice president or whatever it is. So I think some of those things are really good. AI can help us with things like it could help us with matchmaking. So it may be able to go out and it looks at your skill gaps and your personality analysis and everything, and it says, here's what you like, and here's this other person who is similar. Maybe you guys should, talk to each other or whatever. And it could also be um, just that connection. Okay. But I would say that there are certain things that I would consider no zones in that respect as well when we're talking about using that type of technology. The first one is bad news. So we never want AI to deliver a poor performance review or put somebody on a performance improvement plan. because we really need that human interaction with that. Um, if somebody says, I think I'm in the wrong career, I don't think AI is equipped to handle that. It might, yeah, it might come back and say, okay, that's a big picture topic. Maybe that's something you want to talk with your manager or something. And then the last one there is a conflict resolution. So I do not think that AI should handle things like if you have a conflict with a colleague, it shouldn't be the mediator for that. There are just certain things that really require that human interaction. And we have to remember that as we go through.
100%, which if you're pulling managers away from like a lot of admin duties, then perhaps the focus is more on people interactive skills, people management skills, thinking in more of a strategic way and growth in that area. But I can't help but think that a lot of people would use some AI tool to prep for a difficult conversation. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think they can. And I'll just say too, I'm just looking in the chat, there was a conversation around nuances and
Yeah,
terminology and stuff. And AI can help you with that. I mean, especially if you are a US based person and you're having to talk to somebody from another country and there are, to help to understand how to communicate effectively, that is definitely something that AI could help you with. But I think that there's always going to have this healthy balance between, what do you let AI do for you versus what do you do? And I think the big thing here is we can use AI to fuel connection, but we don't want it to replace it.
100%. So how does that change the role of, how does all of this change the role of mid-level and senior leaders? And why is it important for them to really know the power of these tools and where they're going?
Well, number one, it's going to impact the workforce, and it already is. There's a number of different organizations who are implementing and using agentic tools. A lot of the big tools that we use, whether it's your HRIS system or your CRM or your LMS, they're incorporating these agentic elements in there. And number one, we really need to be aware of how that works. And they're also, the one thing I'm going to say too is we're going to see um, what I'm calling AI employees in the workforce too. That's a lot of what these agents are going to be, where they're going to take on some roles and they're going to take on responsibilities that are a part of uh, how things happen. Right now, the way the workflow works is it's human to agent and stuff. So you talk to the AI, it does a task, and then it comes back to you. If in the midst of that you are the bottleneck, but what's going to happen starting probably next year and going forward is you're going to see the workflow shift to agent talking to agent. So agents are going to talk to other agents to complete complex tasks without your constant supervision. And I know that sounds real sci-fi, but that's already happening now. So let's say right now you are using ChatGPT to do an outline, okay? And then you take that outline and you feed that to an image generator, okay? And I did that today. I went in and I took some information and fed it in, and I got an infographic that I wanted to use. And I'm going to tell you, Nano Banana is the king. It can create all these wonderful things. And then I take that image and I put that into a slide builder, okay? And in that case, you're the glue that holds all those things together. But what's going to happen now is you're going to give a request to an agent or something, maybe like build me a 3 module leadership course on empathy. Okay, so what'll happen is it'll go out and it'll look at a research engine. maybe to find the latest studies on empathy. And then it'll pass those along to an instructional design agent who's going to craft the script. And then that's going to then plug in to a media agent who's going to generate the graphics. And then finally, you're going to have a quality assurance agent who's going to review the output against your brand standards. And then only then will it come back to you for review. And I think this is the big change that's going to replace prompt engineering and some of the things that we're doing now. What we're going to see is we're not going to be out there buying software. We're not going to be going in um, to whatever we're doing. We're going to be looking at that digital org chart of those agents besides the humans.
Hmm.
And I know that, that this is kind of out there, but I'm going
Yeah.
to tell you, I think it's going to happen. So you're going to have to decide things like, do I want my sales training agent to have permission to talk to my CRM, like Salesforce, okay? Or do they need to go through a human manager first, okay? So when we think about this, what's going to happen is we're not going to just use AI. We're going to use AI to manage AI teams. Um, and that's what's coming.
You know what's interesting about that is it makes me think that at what point does AI decide what we do for a living based on the information it gathers about us, which can be positive because if you're more in alignment with your natural skills, that's really great. But what about the choice? I guess the overall assessment piece of it in terms of skills and career path and things like that.
Well,
So,
I think that we're all going to have, and if we don't already have, we're going to have an AI component to our job. Okay. But what we're going to see is we're going to move from being content creators, like I said before, to strategic architects. And I invite you guys to read my paper when it comes out in February. If you're a member of ATD, you can get that for free in February of 2026. But I see the roles changing. I see new roles coming on board. Um, and there's a lot of exciting things coming on because um, now, okay, AI is not going to replace us, but it is going to change the way we work. It's going to change what we do in our workflow, and we have to understand that. But like I said, we need to look at where does AI do things well, and where do we need to be the person that fits in? We always need to be that person that sets up those guardrails, that checks, that has that human AI human interface. But AI is going to be slowly taking on those things, but it only knows as much as we give it, so it can
mm,
only check for those things that we tell it to check and that we process in because we're building, at some point, I'm thinking that, and this is a philosophical discussion, but at some point, maybe
mhm,
agents will be building agents, and stuff. But I
right.
think that right now we still have that human in the loop that's going to be an important part of whatever we do.
It strikes me that we're all being forced, or this is a direction we're going into being more strategic thinkers, and not everybody maybe has that proclivity. So is that just going to be in the workplace an evolutionary need where that critical thinking piece based on the information presented is going to be a part of most jobs as opposed to just a tactical role? I wonder,
Yeah, I think I,
how do you teach strategic thinking, and I guess like any other skill, I would assume.
Yeah, it's like any other skill. And this has been something that we've been struggling with for a long time, moving from that tactical, what's in front of your face, to that strategic thinking in terms of planning out what you're doing in the future. The and I think a lot of it is when we talk about tactical, it's that volume versus speed. So like using that mindset, going from output to outcome. So when you think about we are thinking about how we're going to use things in the strategic. That metric is business impact. So,
Mhm.
how do we measure impact in our what we're doing? And I think as a leader today, that we've got to stop looking for tasks to automate and we have to start looking for processes to delegate to AI.
Ah, interesting. Nice way to sum it up there. I know that you have some sources that you were maybe going to pop into the chat uh, that are very, everybody's always looking for a great source of the best information. And I know you know of a lot of them, and you had chosen a few that you wanted to share with
Yeah, I'm
our
gonna
watchers today.
let me let me throw those in the chat here. Um, moving down here if I can press enter. So I just shared a couple of things. I mean, there's lots of stuff that's out there, out on the systems and different places that you can go. I'll also put, Brenda, if it's okay, I'm going to put my LinkedIn in here
Sure,
as well,
please
because
do.
I write all the time about things, things top of mind, other things. But Microsoft has got a great area called their work lab that has lots of interesting articles and things that you can look at. I love
Mhm.
going out to Harvard Business Review. The article that I put in there is just an article about agentic AI and how it's going to change work. And the other person that I'm a big fangirl of is Professor Molick, and he has a newsletter and thing that you can get called One Useful Thing. But tons of good resources that are out there, and I'm hoping that that a lot of this was useful. If you've got other questions and stuff, I'm sure that Brenda and her team are looking forward to connecting with you and answering those as well.
Yeah, and I know that you do consulting around this too. So, you're constantly finding yourself interfacing with the business world and have a bead on what's going on there. I'm just seeing a few things coming in on the chat here. One of them talking about having a learning mindset, a growth mindset, so important, and that takes a certain internal inertia and a decision in the individual's life that you want to continue to grow
Well,
because that
and
does
I'll
take
say,
effort and time, right?
I'm going to say two things about that. Number one, if you sign up for a webinar, be present, be active. Don't say I'm going to watch the recording because you're not going to watch the recording, okay? Um, and then the other thing is to allow yourself some time for yourself. I schedule in my calendar at least an hour every work that's just time that I call my playtime, where I can go out and I can try something. I'm not distracted by work. I'm not waiting for a meeting. It's usually late in the day on Friday afternoon, um, but just so that I can try some things out. And I would encourage you to do that as well. Not a webinar, not reading or anything. Just spend some time where you can, play in AI or you can try something out and do something. If your organization has a lot of systems locked down or you want to just look at some different tech, what I have done is set up a Gmail account that I just used, and I call it my tech tool. And so I'll go in and use that to go in and sign up for a free trial or something like that. It's not tied to my work email, and then when I'm done, I can get rid of that free trial or whatever. But I really think that there's so much out there. There's so much to learn. I don't want you to get overwhelmed, but take some time to just try some stuff out yourself. There's always new things happening. This week, in some of our Gen AI tools, they announced a bunch of new additions and things, and I'm looking forward to sitting down Friday afternoon and testing some of those things out.
Well, I've got one last question for you here, which is with everything that you're seeing, if we see you again a year from today, what's it going to look like in terms of this whole landscape?
I think it's going to look pretty crazy. I'm going to tell you, I have a favorite conference that I go to every year. It's the second week in January. I'll be out at the Consumer Electronics Show in
Mhm.
Las Vegas, and this is everything that has to do with new technologies, whether it's with motorized cars or if it's healthcare, different things. And I think that a lot of our consumer use and our consumer products really drive what we do in the workforce. And so I would recommend that you look at some of those things as well.
Mhm.
We're all using AI on our smartphones. There are new technology. I was talking with my niece this morning because she's getting her son a 3D printer for Christmas, and she wanted a recommendation on something, one that she could get. She said she struggled, and I'm like, why did you email me sooner? You may not be able to get one now. But there's all of that, a lot of that's out there that we're going to try at home, or our kids are going to prompt us, or other family members, and then that's going to impact what we're doing in the workplace too. So you're going to see a lot of that, especially this next year. There's tons of new things that are coming out. You think about the Meta glasses. I've had Meta glasses for a couple of years where I can put those glasses on and I can ask Meta for information, all those things. When we got Siri, on our phones, or Google, there's just tons of those things that are happening all the time. So who knows what's going to happen this time next year? I can't wait to find out.
Yeah, very exciting. And I think that a lot of the big companies will still be working on getting that governance and that structure and those guardrails in place. As fun as it is on the consumer side, is as serious as it is on the business side implications. Let's see if we have any questions here. Oh, interesting. I think we, I think we're good though. And I really thank you everybody for the lively chat and comments and for joining us here today. Like I said, a recording of this will be available on Clarity's website and on our YouTube channel. And just want to say happy holidays to everybody this time of year. And Debbie, thank you so much. What a pleasure to have you and an honor to have you on our webcast this month. We'll look forward to seeing everybody next year.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun, and I look forward to hearing what everybody's doing as well. Feel free to
Yeah.
reach out to me.
Thank you so much for all the great info. Really wonderful. Thanks, everyone.